What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and in case you hadn't heard, a pretty big weekend. We just wrapped up Pro Tour Ixalan a couple of days ago, so it's my job in this video to take you through the tournament results and give you what are presumably the top 8 decks in the format. And by the by, just before we get started here, I think we can be even more sure than usual that these are just the de facto best decks in the format right now, because the Pro Tour happened a little bit later on in the season than it normally does, so pros had more time to prepare for it and test decks and such. You know, usually the Pro Tour happens relatively early in the season, but this time we got to see the results of Worlds 2017 before the PT, we got to see the results of Nationals 2017, and we got a bunch more MTGO competitive league data than we normally would have up to this point. So I think that the results of this tournament, as far as, evaluating the meta goes, is actually even more set in stone than usual. Just keep that right here in the back of your mind as we go through these decks right here. And I'll start with, obviously, 8th place. And cool thing about this is that 8th place was the only deck that actually repeated, It came in 8th and 5th, and it was probably the favorite deck going into this Pro Tour, and that's 4-color Energy. Well, Piotr Glogowski piloted this deck to 8th place at PT Ixalan, and none other than Siggy, Mike Sigrist, piloted it to 5th place. But these decks are actually really different in the way they're constructed, and I actually think that says a lot about the flexibility of this deck. So let's take a look at Piotr's list first. Well, he's running the basic core of any energy deck, and in fact, Siggy's running this same core. You're going to run Long Tusk Cub. We've seen these cards before. Long Tusk Cub, Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso, Attune with Ether, and in the 4-color versions, you also run Servant of the Conduit, so you can get that black mana when you need it. And in case you're wondering, a big reason why you'd want to add black to the deck in the first place is so you get access to the Scarab God, which is just obviously one of the best creatures in Standard, but it's really good in this deck where things like Rogue Refiner, Long Tusk Cub, Whirler Virtuoso, they're already hard enough to deal with, but when you can reanimate them as 4/4s, it becomes absolutely ridiculous. Whirler Virtuoso is already annoying enough, but when it comes back as a 4/4 that makes flyers, that's dumb. But that's not the only reason why both of these decks played black. Both decks also played 2 copies of Vraska Relic Seeker, which is a relatively new addition to the deck. But you can see why she's there. Games are going to go long enough in this deck that you can get a Vraska down and she can either kill opposing things, that's pretty important, that's really good removal in that way, or she can just provide some inevitability by, getting you a dude every single turn. And if you can't get to her ultimate, it's pretty backbreaking. So Vraska just does a bunch of really good stuff in this deck, Whether it's clear the board on the other side or develop your board, both things are good. I hope you've gotten enough time to look at Glow's list right here. I'm going to bring up Mike Sigrist's list right here, but in case you feel like you didn't get enough time to look at any of these lists, you can just click the first link in the description. That'll take you to TCG Player. I'll remind you of this at the end of the video too, and you can view any of these deck lists on their website. So do that if you feel like it, but here is Siggy's list right here, and it is different in numerous important ways. First of all, Mikey shaves one of the most important cards in the deck by 1 copy, Bristling Hydra. Looks a little bit dangerous, but he gets a lot of other amazing cards, and his deck is a lot closer to the Teamer Energy list than Glow's was. He gets to play Chandra in the main board of his list, and he's playing a couple of copies of Glorybringer, another holdover from Teamer. Note that Sigrist also makes room for Magma Spray in his main deck. I think that's an interesting meta call right now against things like Dread Wanderer in the Black-Red aggro matchup, Earthshaker Kinra in Black-Red and Ramanap Red, and a bunch of other stuff. This was probably important against Sacred Cat more than once this weekend, which may be a little surprising to hear, but Sacred Cat was actually one of the cards of the weekend, amazingly, so that's another thing Spray can be important against. Now overall, even though this deck didn't make the top 4 or anything, I think it's still obviously one of the best decks in the format. It's the only deck that's represented twice in the top 8, and that's no surprise because it was really well represented as a whole at the tournament. A lot of players on 4-color Energy because a lot of players recognize it may be, at the end of the day, the best deck in the format. Again, it didn't finish incredibly high here, but note that both lists that placed in the top 8 are really different. Again, I think that belies the flexibility of this archetype. So with how versatile it is and how many different card choices the deck can make, I think that it's pretty easy for it to just sort of go back to the drawing board, figure out what it wants to do, and then get back on its feet. Well, the 7th place deck over the weekend is maybe my favorite deck from the entire event, and there was only 1 player on this deck. That's pretty awesome. Guillaume Matignon had a lot of faith in Jeskai Approach. Now, we're pretty familiar with this deck because we've seen Blue-White Approach off and on all season, but Why add the red? Let's talk about that. Now, the only red card added to the main deck, at least, there were a couple more added to the board. We'll talk about those, but the only one added to the main deck is the playset of Harness Lightning, which actually makes perfect, amazing sense if you have experience with this deck. You know, blue and white, good color combination for a control deck, but playing blue and white in this format means that you don't have any access to really good instant speed removal at just 2 mana, which is really, really important in this meta for taking out a number of creatures. So, Harness Lightning actually makes a lot of sense, and sometimes you'll be able to take out like 4, 5, and 6 toughness creatures with it, and it also gives us something to do with the energy from Glimmer of Genius. We didn't have any real outlet for it before. So I fully support that. You know, you're only splashing 1 card in the main deck, so it's easy enough to make sure that you have the mana for it. But there are a couple of more red cards in the sideboard I want to talk about because they're cool. Fiery Cannonade is in the sideboard. I like that. You know, something else that you don't really have is a really early sweeper like a Sweltering Suns, but you also don't have the red mana to play Sweltering Suns on turn 3 reliably. So the answer to that is Fiery Cannonade, which is going to take out a whole board full of tokens. It's going to take out 2 or 3 guys on turn 3, depending on if you're on the draw or the play. So, you know, this shores up a lot of problems for this deck. And the other red card, by the way, in the sideboard is a Locust God, which seems great. Note that the main deck has a copy of Pull from Tomorrow, and so does the sideboard, and that's always been a hilarious combo with the Locust God. Seems like you could end a game pretty quick that way. While we're talking about big dumb 6-mana creatures, note that Torrential Gearhulk is in the main deck here, which is something that we actually have not seen that often lately in Blue-White Approach. Blue-White Approach has, at least again lately, decided that it wants to take all the creatures out of the main deck so that any creature removal is dead in game 1, and then bring in its Torrential Gearhulks once all the removal is sided out. What I would imagine here is that people aren't siding out their removal because they know Gearhulk's going to come in anyway, so we've decided to put Gearhulks in the main deck. I assume that's what's going on here, and it's probably the right time for that because Torrential Gearhulk always felt like it was missing from the main deck when you're playing Blue-White Approach. One more thing I want to point out is the addition of Commit to Memory in this deck, which is graveyard hosing. At least the memory half of it could be graveyard hosing, and the commit half of it is actually a pretty decent answer to things like Hazoret and the Scarab God and stuff you would otherwise have to exile. You can just commit it, and then a couple of turns later, know you have to hold up the mana for Essence Scatter or whatever you're doing, disallow, you know. So, really like the addition of Commit to Memory in the deck, especially if you're going to play Torrential Gearhulk main. That makes all the sense. There's also the trick, by the way, if you somehow have the mana of casting Approach of the Second Sun the first time and then just committing it to 2 cards below, you know. You can also, if you really want to, if they duress Approach of the Second Sun out of your hand or something, you can always memory it back into your library, and that can be an important play occasionally. Overall, I'm really surprised to see an Approach deck in the top 8 at all, but again, red was the innovation that the deck needed. I really like the idea of Jeskai Approach going forward here. I think that the deck still has a couple of holes, but for the most part, the addition of red really helped out. You know, again, 2-mana instant speed removal like Harness Lightning that can go relatively big occasionally and gives us another outlet for our energy. Everything the deck wanted, and access to Fiery Cannonade out of the sideboard as a really good splashable, you know, 3-mana sweeper option. Again, deck wanted exactly that, so I really like this build going forward. We'll see if it sticks around. Now in 6th place, we had the perennial all-star Temur Energy, piloted by Christian Hawk. Now this deck actually does innovate a little bit. Here's the list right here. Note that again, it's got the core in it. You know, it's got Long Tusk Cub, it's got Rogue Refiner, it's got Attune with Ether, it's got all the hits. You know, everyone's going to play all play sets of all of those cards in every energy deck. They are the backbone, but the deck innovates a little bit over Temur lists in a couple of important ways. Now, just like Sigrist's 4-color energy list, this Temur energy list also decided to play Magma Spray in the main deck, again to shore up numerous creatures and keep them from coming back thanks to Godfar's Gift or Scarab God or what have you. So, you know, or even just embalming or eternalizing for that matter. So, really like the idea of playing Spray, and I like that it's catching on in these lists. Something else I want to point out about the main deck is that they're playing one copy of Confiscation Coup in the main. This is a pretty popular card to play in Teamer sideboards, and sometimes you'll see it in the main, but I just think it's important to note that a deck that plays it in the main ended up in the top 8. In fact, the only Teamer Energy list, a deck that people had pegged as the best deck in the format, the only Teamer Energy list to make the top 8, played the one copy of Coup in the main. I think Confiscation Coup is actually a much more important card in this meta than people are giving it credit for. But that's not all the innovation in this Teamer list. There's also innovation in the sideboard, where Hawk played Vizier of Many Faces, which is showing up in a lot of sideboards now. It sort of started showing up in a lot of blue-black control sideboards, and this deck has ported it over to its sideboard because it's got a lot of cool stuff it can do. It can copy a Bristling Hydra without ever actually targeting it, which is kind of important. It can copy things like Glorybringer and get its Exert trigger. Scarab God, which is pretty darned important as well. There's just a bunch of creatures that Vizier of Many Faces can copy profitably, and that's why it's showing up in a lot of sideboards lately. But also note, this is fun, the one copy of River's Rebuke. I can imagine this is in there for the tokens matchup, but it could also be in there for, aggro matchups that you assume you're going to get to turn 6 on. But again, against tokens, I could definitely see this being a super effective sideboard card, and I love that it's seeing some play. Overall, Teamer is still, sort of the old workhorse of the format. Teamer has been a thing, Teamer Energy specifically, for a good solid year now, and I don't see it going away because Energy is a really reliable deck that's obviously really good and plays some of the best pieces in the whole format. So I don't see Teamer Energy going anywhere. We're halfway home. In 4th place, there was Samuel Island-Felt with, believe it or not, Marty Vehicles. That's right, the sort of return of Marty Vehicles, It's not entirely fair to say that because Marty Vehicles has been rising back up the ranks the last few weeks as fewer and fewer people use a Braid in their main decks and even their sideboard. The use of a Braid is sort of dropping off a bit, and that allows decks like Marty Vehicles to come back out of the woodwork. There's also the fact that fewer people are playing sweepers nowadays. We see a lot of Bonsu's Last Reckoning, we see a lot of Yahini's Expertise, see a lot of Fumigate, see a lot of Settle the Wreckage. We don't see as much of those, including Hour of Devastation or Sweltering Suns. They're just not as prevalent as they used to be just even a month ago. So something like that can also help a deck like Marty Vehicles, which is already decent against sweepers because of the vehicles, be a better deck, And honestly, not much has changed in this list if you haven't noticed. That's why I'm talking mostly about why it's better now. It's not because it uses, a bunch of different cards or it innovates a whole lot over, its previous lists. It's mostly because the format is changing in a way that allows the deck to exist again. And I think that's kind of neat. Overall, though, I don't know that Marty Vehicles is necessarily here to stay. Godfarer's Gift had a really good weekend at the Pro Tour, and as Godfarer's Gift goes, in a weird way, so does Marty, because the more people are scared of Godfarer's Gift, the more people will play a Braid, and the more people play a Braid, the less, safe it is to play a bunch of Hardy Kirans and Aethersphere Harvesters and stuff, and Toolcraft Exemplars that aren't good unless you have an artifact. So I'm just not 100% sure this deck has staying power if Godfarer's Gift becomes really popular, and it's looking like it might. But we're in the top 3 now. 3rd place, just out of the top 2, was Ramanap Red, believe it or not, by John Rolfe. The deck is still around. Ramanap Red is another deck that not a whole lot of people like nowadays. It's just been around too much. A lot of people have lost to it, and a lot of people just hate, what they consider to be, but aren't, mindless, mono-red aggro decks. There's a lot of decision-making that goes into playing aggro, but a lot of people just consider this deck to be mindless, and so they hate it. But fear not, the deck actually does innovate. There is something to talk about. It's not just the usual mono-red list. That's kind of dumb. You know what I mean? This deck does innovate in a few ways, and this isn't the first time we've seen these innovations. Just in the last week, I've seen a couple of builds very similar to this, but this build in the main deck makes room for 2 copies of Harsh Mentor, amazingly. It also makes room for 2 copies of Rampaging Ferocidon. That's pretty awesome too, against the tokens builds. This looks really good, and even in a race, it doesn't look like a bad card. And again, against mid-range, it's got Menace, so it's hard to block. There's just a lot of good things to like about Ferocidon, and it's definitely above curve, and it's only 3 mana. That's something that mono-red aggro decks are usually going to want. So cut a copy or 2 of On-Crop Crasher for that. And as far as Harsh Mentor goes, really, really, really like the addition of this card in this deck. You know, it's going to hose in the mirror match. It's going to punish them for using Hazoret's onboard ability. It's going to punish blue-black control decks and 4-color energy decks for using the Scarab God's activated ability, and that can be important. You know, some games you'll get them down to 4 or 6, and then they'll start turning the corner with the Scarab God. Well, if you punish them for using its activation, they don't have the option of doing that, which is really important. Same thing goes with things like Blistering Hydra. You know, you'll get them down to a relatively low life total. Blistering Hydra will help them turn the corner and start outclassing your dudes, and you can't kill it with anything. Well, in this case, Harsh Mentor will at least punish them for using that energy. Same thing with Whirler Virtuoso or Long Tusk Cub. There's just a million reasons to want to play Harsh Mentor right now, and I just really like the addition of this card. Overall, I think that this is really good evidence that this isn't the final form of this deck, and we won't know what the final form is for maybe quite some time. You know, Ramanap Red has been rocking and rolling, just, you know, sort of rolling along as the same deck for a while now, but it's become clear in the last month or so that Ramanap Red has to evolve if it's going to survive. And I think this is a good place to start, but not necessarily the ultimate list. I think that we can definitely evolve and make innovations from here, and that's kind of exciting. But we've made it to the finals here, and in second place was Pascal Maynard with Blue-White God Pharaoh's Gift. This deck is awesome. Now, this is another deck that I think is sort of made possible by the drop in popularity of a Braid. You know, fewer people playing a Braid, the better God Pharaoh's Gift gets, and it definitely proved that over the weekend. Don't catch yourself sleeping. Don't let them catch you sleeping and playing Noah Braids, because if you have no real form of artifact removal, even in your main deck, then you're going to have a serious problem against God Pharaoh's Gift. The deck is just obviously really powerful, extremely resilient, and hard to deal with, especially if you can't, remove God Pharaoh's Gift or exile its threats. It's just going to keep coming at you, and it's really good at turning the corner. You know, the deck can go from situations where it has literally 0 board presence to the next turn winning the game. You know, so as long as you get a God Pharaoh's Gift down and you can get an Angel of Invention out of your graveyard, things are looking up for you. I mean, plays like that just turn the game around completely in the blink of an eye, and even creatures like Sacred Cat that just chump blocked for you in the early game suddenly comes back as a 4/4 lifelinker. Look at that, that's ridiculous. And like, even Champion of Wits, I think that at one point, on camera, in the finals, Maynard played a Champion of Wits with 6 power. Drew, I think it was 6. And drew 6 cards and discarded 2. So that's just, it's freaking unbelievable, you know. The deck just has a ton of tricks up its sleeve, and just because you remove its creatures, that doesn't mean it's the end. As a matter of fact, the deck kind of wants you to remove its creatures, but just in case you don't, it's got things like Minister of Inquiries and Strategic Planning and Chart of Course to dump cards into its graveyard when it needs to. And then on turn 4, it refurbishes a God Pharaoh's Gift, and suddenly, when it goes to combat, you're staring down a huge Angel of Invention. Either, a 4/4 Angel of Invention and 2 servos, or a 6-power Angel of Invention with lifelink is just, that's hard to deal with, man. That is really tough to deal with. And again, the deck can go from nothing to that in just the play of 1 card. So, this deck is extremely, extremely dangerous, and a lot of people had it pegged as the better deck going into the finals. Overall, again, I think that if more people start playing a Braid, which they very likely will after the results of this tournament, I don't think that this deck is nearly as good as it was in this tournament, but I don't think that makes it a glass cannon. I think that the deck is resilient enough and powerful enough and has enough, plays that turn the corner immediately at very, very little cost, that it can probably still survive, and it looks like an incredibly fun deck to play that you can never count out. But first place at Pro Tour Ixalan over the weekend was Sultai Energy, piloted by perennial competitor Seth Manfield. Now he's been the world champion, and he's got a Pro Tour championship under his belt. Good job, buddy. This deck looks a little bit weird and unfocused on paper. It's a traditional sort of energy deck that plays the core, Long Tusk Cub, Rogue Refiner, Attune with Ether. We got those. But it sort of splits the difference, and halfway through the list becomes a green-black Winding Constrictor deck, a snake deck. It's got 4 Winding Constrictors. It's got Rishkars in the deck. It's got Walking Ballistas. So this sort of splits its attention between energy and a snake deck. But remember, the snake gives you more energy and is really crazy with Long Tusk Cub. So makes sense that you'd put them together. But there's other reasons to play black in this deck aside from just the snake. It also has the Scarab God, which needs no introduction, and also Hostage Taker, which is sort of low-key one of the best cards in the format. Sultai Energy placed really well at a couple of tournaments early on in the format, and it's been kind of laying low since then. It pops up every now and again, but not as often as it really should for how powerful of a deck it is, and Hostage Taker is one of the best parts of the deck and one of the best reasons to play Sultai, aside from the Scarab God. It had multiple key plays in the finals, and as a matter of fact, a lot of the black cards in the deck had multiple key plays over the finals and over the weekend for that matter. Duress out of the sideboard got the one copy of Fumigate in Maynard's entire 75 out of his hand. That was really, really important in the finals. Aside from that, in terms of how good the black cards in Seth's deck were, Winding Constrictor came down every single game on turn 2, it seemed like, in the finals match. And Glint Sleeve Siphoner drew a butt ton of cards over that match. And in fact, in one game, I feel like it drew 7 or 8 extra cards. Because Seth had 2 copies of it at one time, and he was just filling his hand with it all game, Glint Sleeve Siphoner proved to be really, really relevant in the match. Another critical piece in the deck was Blossoming Defense, and that should come as no surprise. Blossoming Defense has been one of the best cards literally in the entire format since it first entered the format, but over the finals match, it made multiple critical key plays. It kept Hostage Taker alive a couple of times. I believe it kept Winding Constrictor alive once, and it also technically won the finals for Seth. The very last card played in the finals match was Blossoming Defense to pump up an unblocked creature. Overall, though, here's the problem. Moving forward, I don't know that the deck has a whole lot of room to innovate. The deck list is very tight and looks about as close to perfect as it's going to get. Now, I'm not saying the deck cannot be improved on. Obviously, it can. There are ways. There's going to be ways we have to shore up matchups, but the deck is, again, extremely tight, and it's going to be tough to move things here and there or cut anything for that matter. So I'm not sure the deck's going to look much different moving forward, but I do think the deck can still be very successful moving forward. Sequencing is very important in this deck. Very, very important in this deck, so it does require a skilled pilot. But even if you don't necessarily get the best sequences early on, almost any 2 cards will work relatively well together, so it almost doesn't matter what you get. You can sequence it to your advantage. And with that, we are done with our top 8. That was top 8 Pro Tour Ixalan, and I actually, overall here, final word on the format, think that things are looking healthy, We're in a relatively diverse format. I know there's energy decks, but even the 2 energy decks that claim to be the same, 4-color energy in this top 8, are very, very different lists, Teamer Energy is a different list than those, and Sultai Energy is a very different energy list than the previous 2. Aside from that, we've got Ramanap Red made a top 8 appearance, the return of Marty Vehicles, that's pretty awesome. A Jeskai Approach deck, that's insane too. So this format is actually looking relatively diverse, and these weren't even all the decks. There's Blue-White Godfarer's Gift, and we even saw Mono-White Vampire Monument have a 100% conversion rate on day 2 or day 1. Everybody that played Mono-White Vampire Monument in the first day made it to day 2. Think about that. This is actually a pretty good looking format right now, as far as I can tell, that's relatively diverse and has a pretty good spread of decks to choose from, and these aren't even all of them. But I'm tapped out for now. That's all I've got for now. Hope you enjoyed this coverage of Pro Tour Ixalan. If I missed anything that you find important, let me know down there in the comments section. We'll get a discussion going. I'm always interested in what you're interested in. And if you want to view all of these decks, just click the very first link in the description. That'll take you over to TCG Player. They help bring content to you, They help me bring you deck techs and Pro Tour coverage and stuff like that. So help me out by clicking on that first link and going over to them and checking out these decks on their site. You can also like the video if you enjoyed the video, because that just makes sense. You can also sub if you're new and you enjoyed it, or if you didn't enjoy it, you should still sub, because there's content that might matter to you even though you don't like my face. Or if you just have been watching for a while and you haven't subbed, it would mean a lot if you have. Plus, spoiler season's coming up, bunch of deck techs still for Ixalan Standard, so you might want to sub. Hit the bell for the notifications. You can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or kick $1 into the Patreon pot at patreon.com/SBMTG. And remember, if you just throw me $1 every month, then you can see what every deck tech's going to be the day before I upload it. That's pretty cool. I think, at least. But that's all I got for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards.